The Arsenal quadruple, is it on?
I honestly don't think it's about physically. I don't think it's about quality. I don't think it's about squad depth. I simply think it is going to be mentality. How many trophies Arsenal win this season? He knows what he has to deliver, Mikel Arteta, at the end of the season.
Should they get to a point where they think, actually, we've really got to focus on the ones that are really important, which is the Champions League and, of course, the Premier League?
And I think they will start to focus very, very quickly in on what is genuinely important.
Maybe the most important game of the season is actually the Carabao Cup final, because maybe that's the tipping point where Arsenal realise they can win a trophy.
And on the flip side, if they were to lose that game, then maybe they would start to think that Manchester City have got their number. I think it's massive, bearing in mind we know it's going to be City and Arsenal going toe-to-toe for the title. And who knows, maybe in the Champions League as well.
Yes, welcome to another edition of Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface. And as always, I'm joined by talkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook, a man who has leaked more inside info than a government memo, and former West Ham United and England striker, FA Cup finalist, no less, Dean Ashton. We're trying to figure out whether or not Dashboard Dean is a nickname or whether it's just where he spends most of his time. Although I noticed that you've gone back into witness protection this week, which is means that we haven't given away your location. Do you know what? If that is your living room, we really need to get you sort of like, we need Dion Dublin round there for changing rooms, don't we? Is that what he does? No, he does Homes Under the Hammer. One of them. Carol Smiley, where is she?
Yeah, she could do a job actually on this interior. But look, I'm not one of those to put the trophies behind me, mainly because I didn't win any.
You should put your FA Cup final winning medal from Oh, hold on a second.
That's harsh. That's harsh.
It wasn't my fault. It was Steven Gerrard.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
This is what we're talking about today. The Arsenal quadruple. Is it on? The medical mystery that is Arsenal's injury roster. The Villa Park disaster class. Somerville saving the blushes of West Ham United. The fight that Leeds and West Ham both showed while Burnley blundered once more. We'll talk about the two new managers in the Premier League that are starting this week. Victor Pereira and Igor Tudor, who is taking over Tottenham Hotspur. And Crook's a little bit concerned whether or not he knows his apples.
Yeah, we've had the leaked picture of him flying over to London with his agent. And the first thing I noticed was a basket of, well, what looked like about a dozen shiny green apples in front of him. So clearly he's a man who enjoys apples. But yeah, does he know his onions? Is he going to keep Tottenham in the Premier League? I think this is a massive gamble, by the way. It could have Ivan Juric vibes about it. You remember how well that went for him at Southampton?
I think you missed an opportunity there, Crook. I thought you were going to go with Apple Crumble and Spurs and work it all in, but you didn't, which is unlike you because you're usually so nice to them. Igor Tudor, who did a good job actually when filling in as the Juventus manager, and I think he's got a good record of saving teams or quick upturn, which is what they need. They needed a quick upturn. They just need 3 quick wins. If they get 3 quick wins, they'll be absolutely fine. If they don't, then they're going to be struggling at the bottom of the table. I don't think they'll go down. But as I said to Stuart Pearce about 15, 20 days ago, they will be involved in it because they're just not there right now. They're just not there. There's no fighting spirit. That needs to be instilled in them very quickly. Let's crack on with the pod then. After a weekend of FA Cup action, there's only one place to start with the big question of the week. Are Arsenal going to win all 4? 16 minutes and 21 seconds, the distance between the first and the fourth goal for Arsenal, which absolutely blew away any challenge that was offered to them on Sunday from the League One strugglers that they were up against on Sunday. So talk to me, Crookie, when you looked at the performance and the way that they attacked the game, because they really did attack the game, what was your view?
As expected, I mean, multiple changes made again by Mikel Arteta. Obviously lost Calafiori in the warm-up, which I think in terms of the quadruple could be a massive blow moving forward. But the squad is so strong that they were never in any jeopardy, were they? They absolutely tore Wigan apart in that first half an hour. New role for Bukayo Saka, I thought was quite interesting because he struggled to put numbers on the board from a wide area, obviously used him more centrally and really looked at home in that position, albeit against a really poor League One side. So yeah, job done as far as Arsenal are concerned, and with minimum fuss.
Yes, it was obviously a little bit disruptive because they had to bring in Saka last minute. It literally happened in the warm-up and he was thrust into it. So he went to number 10 and you had Miles Lewis-Skelly going back to left back. I think he was looking forward to playing in midfield. But I mean, look, I think that they do need a little bit of tactical variation. So maybe they'll stumble over something with Saka in the number 10 position, Dean Ashton. But is it really possible? Can Arsenal really keep challenging on all four fronts? Or should they get to a point where they think, actually, we've really got to focus on the ones that are really important, which is the Champions League and, of course, the Premier League?
I do think they have got the squad depth to go for all four. Obviously, injuries are going to play a big part, as it has done for Arsenal over the last 4 or 5 seasons. It has been an issue for the manager to deal with, and especially some of these reoccurring injuries for certain players must be very frustrating when you want to be able to use them, and certainly ones that you might feel are your starters in the big games. Will they? No, I don't think they will, because I think ultimately they've already shown that mentally it's going to be a tough season for them, and ultimately it is about getting over the line in one of those big competitions, which I think they will do, and I think they will start to focus very, very quickly in on what is genuinely important, albeit they're not going to say that. He knows what he has to deliver, Mikel Arteta, at the end of the season. And I think they've already shown that in some of the approaches to certain games. This was never one to worry about, but in certain games, I think they are managing the season.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And that's why I think you have more pragmatic matches and they're not too worried about dropping the odd point here and there, because they think to themselves, over the course of the season, they'll pick up enough to keep a distance between them and Manchester City. Maybe that is going to be the case. Maybe that approach is the right one, although it does irk some fans who want the handbrake taken off a little bit. I think Crook said this the other week. Maybe the most important game of the season is actually the Carabao Cup final. Because maybe that's the tipping point where Arsenal realise they can win a trophy. If they beat Manchester City in that, maybe that's the spur that sends them on to win multiple titles this season.
And on the flip side, if they were to lose that game, then maybe they would start to think that Manchester City have got their number. I think, although this is obviously not the most important trophy of the season, it's probably fourth. Well, it is fourth in Arsenal's priority list. I think psychologically, because it comes so early in the season, 5 weeks' time, I think it's massive, bearing in mind we know it's going to be City and Arsenal going toe-to-toe for the title. And who knows, maybe in the Champions League as well.
However dedicated and close they come to winning all four might be undermined by the fact they keep picking up these little injuries that are disrupting their flow. We had Calafiori in the warm-up yesterday. Bukayo Saka came off at half-time. I don't think there's any suggestion of an injury there, but Ben White had to be taken off towards the end of the game. And we talk about squad depth, Dean, but actually keeping everybody fit has been a bit of an issue for him over the course of the season, hasn't it?
Yes, and with the reoccurring injuries, it means then certain players are playing most of the minutes. You sort of think of certainly Timber and Gabriel in particular at the back, and Declan Rice usually having to play most of the minutes. So it is something that is probably more frustrating than anything else for Mikel Arteta, because they've still got a very, very strong 11, even when these players drop out. It's more cumulative, I would say, as we get to the back end of the season. How is that really going to affect in certain games when you need to push and the fatigue is maybe set in? That's when the questions are going to be asked. But I honestly don't think it's about physically. I don't think it's about quality. I don't think it's about squad depth. I simply think it is going to be mentality. How many trophies Arsenal win this season? I think it is as simple as that, because not only is there massive pressure from everybody in the media, opposition fans, so many people want them to possibly fail or crumble, or would laugh if they sort of crumbled away at this point. And even their own supporters, you can sense it at the Emirates at times, that feeling of just desperation to get over the line in some of these games and the final knock into the season when they get there.
Crook, what did you make of the performance of Eberechi Eze on Sunday?
I think he needed a positive performance after what happened in midweek. I think he got it. But again, I think it's difficult to judge, bearing in mind how bad Wigan are. Obviously, they're managerless. Gary Caldwell going in there from Exeter. But I think confidence-wise, it will do him a world of good that he's featured in such a heavy victory. It's been a strange few weeks, isn't it, for Eze? Because we were at the North London derby, and he was absolutely terrific in that game.
That was 17 games ago, though.
Yeah, but what's happened in the last 16 games for Eze? Is it just that his confidence has been dented because he knows that Mikel Arteta doesn't necessarily have faith in him after what happened at Aston Villa? We've got the North London derby this weekend. He's not going to be anywhere near the starting 11, is he? Eberechi Eze, unless we get a glut of injuries.
Do you know what's really interesting is the fact that actually he was so good in that North London derby, you thought he was cemented in the team for the next God knows how long.
And maybe in the England team as well.
One mistake and all of a sudden he was on the sidelines, and he was on the sidelines for a long time. In fact, his start against Brentford was the first time he started in 10 Premier League games. And obviously, the issue here is not what he does with the ball. It's how often he does it with the ball. And because he plays in moments, whereas you've got someone like Ødegaard who came off the bench on Thursday night and immediately bang, bang, straight in there, driving them forward. And what he does off the ball, Dean, he's got all the talent in the world, Eberechi Eze, but he's got to make sure he's up to the physicality demands that Mikel Arteta wants. He has to be able to do both sides, doesn't he? He has to constantly probe forward, and he has to be ready to chase back.
Yes, I think he has to learn. He was very different at Crystal Palace, where he was clearly the main man and was given real license to roam, to play at his tempo, to, like you said, just have moments where he influenced the games, and he did properly influence games for Crystal Palace. You're right, though. Watch Mikel Arteta on the sidelines. He isn't a manager that allows you to drift through games. If you are not involved with the ball at your feet, you have to do the work. He demands it. You can see it on the sideline. So it's something he's going to have to learn. And with the top managers, I think Pep Guardiola is exactly the same, who Mikel Arteta spent so much time with. He demands so much. So even though we might go, well, why isn't this unbelievably talented player not just playing every single game and given the opportunity to shine? Well, if you don't reach the limits of what the manager demands of you, in and out of possession, you just won't start.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see what happens with Arsenal when they play midweek, because they've got Wolverhampton Wanderers live on talkSPORT on Wednesday night. Can re-establish the gap. And Dean was talking about mentality earlier on. The fact if they go to Wolves and win in midweek, it gives them that extra cushion once more. I think it just sort of, although it means that they're going to have a game in hand over Manchester City for a little while, I think it actually means psychologically that gap doesn't close to within sort of touching distance for a little while. And I think they need that right now, Arsenal. They need that breathing room to be able to focus. Let's move on to Aston Villa 1 and Newcastle United 3. It's the game that's got everyone talking for the wrong reasons. Chris Kavanagh and his officiating team manage a hat-trick of errors in the game. Thank God Newcastle United won the match, because otherwise there would have been absolute bedlam. Tammy Abraham's goal should not have stood. They could have had a penalty, Newcastle, when Lewis Hall was challenged by Victor Lindelof in the box at the Holt end in the first half. And they should have had a penalty when Luca Digne handled the ball. Now, I was doing the commentary of this game, as you know, and I called penalty as soon as the referee blew his whistle, because Luca Digne was in the area and he used his hand. And as far as I remember the rule book, and as you know, I quite like it, that's a penalty kick, although the referee seemed to work out that it was outside the area. Look, we know the PGMO will be having their phone lines melted, Crook, by what happened at the weekend. But have we got to the point where referees and assistants are so reliant on the safety net of VAR that they have forgotten to trust their own eyes?
Well, first and foremost, it sent Hugh Wozencroft into meltdown. He was still banging on about VAR when he was preparing for the Leeds Birmingham game that Dino was at. So it really got inside his head. But do you know what? I think you're right. It's a brilliant point. That the fact that such basic errors were made, I think, is an example of where officials have become too reliant on the technology. The positive thing is that it didn't affect the outcome, that the right team won, thanks mainly to Marco Bizot. I'm still not entirely convinced what on earth he was doing with that challenge. But they were some of the worst mistakes that you will see. And I'm sure Howard Webb will be coming down like a ton of bricks on the officials.
Yes, I do worry a little bit about Marco Bizzot. I thought maybe he hadn't got any Valentine's Day cards, so he was desperate to get some sort of red card over the weekend. Dean Ashton, who gets an absolute mailbag of Valentine's Day cards. From a player's perspective, when an official makes a high-profile error like that, then makes another one, and then another one, how does it affect the temperature and the aggression on the pitch, and how do you manage your emotions? Because Eddie Howe actually was full of praise for his team for doing just that.
It's difficult, very, very difficult. And that's a reason why certainly we used to see players surrounding the referee with sort of, venom coming out of their mouths, because you're so invested and you're so passionate about winning that when these big decisions come around, you want the officials to get it right. But what I am going to say is this is what it was like. There was mistakes. Tammy Abraham's offside. Okay, we can all see it on the telly. But in real time, when it happens very quickly, that margin that we can see, sometimes it's hard to spot if you're an assistant referee. And also, Chris Kavanagh, the Luca Digne one, if you watch it, when he turns, it is obviously handball, and he needs his assistant to help him out, who must
Absolutely.
be in line in terms of, because as a referee in the middle of the pitch, and I wish everybody could be in the middle of the pitch and understand how difficult it is. The depth, how do you see depth as a referee? That is quite difficult. And Luca Digne lands on the line. So he jumps, turns, handballs it, and he lands very close to the line. It's not like he lands where he handballed it. And those little things do make a difference. Now, I'm not sticking up for them in terms of that they're really, really poor decisions. Of course they are. But I can't tell you how difficult it is when you're in the middle of a game like that to get everything right. And that's what it was. That's what it was like. That's what football was like. So all it's done is it's given VAR and the PGML a massive shot in the arm to everyone to go, actually, this is why we've got it, and therefore we have to stick with it. But that's what it was like, and it was frustrating, but you had to deal with it, like Eddie Howe said.
Okay, well, it's what it is like in the EFL, and I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to keep hold of the FA Sam moniker anymore. We're going to have to give that to Dean Ashton. He's going to take over as FA Dean.
That was very politically correct.
However, hold on. How has this narrative taken hold that this is a shot in the arm for VAR because the referees were so bad at the weekend? That all of a sudden we feel as if the VAR is the saviour. Actually, isn't the problem here that the officials just haven't been up to standard, Crook?
Yeah, I'll go back to the point that you made about the fact that officials are too reliant now on the technology, that safety net they have week in, week out in the Premier League. But I take on board Dino's argument about it being a shot in the arm for VAR. And actually, that was a point that Hugh was sort of making on Saturday night and onto Sunday. He was saying, look, we didn't have VAR. We had mistakes from officials. It's not changed the outcome of the game. Is football not better like this? Well, had Aston Villa won as a result of those dodgy decisions, then I'm not sure that Eddie Howe would have agreed with him. I think what he comes back to is what we were promised when the technology was first introduced, that VAR would intervene in clear and obvious errors. What we've seen there is a catalogue of clear and obvious errors that the technology should have sorted out quite quickly had they been able to use. And I think that's where VAR comes into its own.
Yes, and if you use the VAR properly, then you don't have these issues. But Dino, FA Dino, sorry. It's all right saying it's a shot in the arm for VAR, but the assistant is the problem here, isn't it? And no disrespect, and look, I know you said it's difficult to spot, and it is. If you're on the pitch, and we've all been lucky enough to be in these big stadiums and be on the pitch and see the depth perception it is different. You can't necessarily always see the line sometimes because of the way that the pitch cambers, etc., etc. But the assistant on the near side, he's the one who's had the problem. And I wonder whether or not, after having not flagged for Tammy Abraham's goal, and I know you said that it's difficult to spot there, but that's the kind of offside that Darren Can, Sean Massey-Ellis, Gary Bezic get right every single week, by the way. They've got unbelievable... Assistants usually have unbelievable eyes. They can see these things, even the most marginal of offsides. But having sort of missed that one, has it played on his mind so much that he's a little bit scrambled in the aftermath? Hence why you had that penalty issue.
Yeah, I think so. And also, I'm not saying it's easy for them to flip flop between using VAR and not, but ultimately, again, I go back to that's obviously it's very unfortunate that 3 or 4 big errors have been made in one game. But that is, you watch the EFL, some things like this are happening every single week in lots of games, and you deal with it. And lots of supporters are still very much for no VAR. We enjoy the games more because of that, and I got asked by Hugh right at the end of the piece that he was talking about, because him and Jim Proudfoot had a big discussion about it. And then Hugh said to me, is the game better now with VAR, or was it better when, for example, I played? And it was better. But the reason I say that is because the biggest love of football is the joy of scoring and having that feeling with the supporters and that moment. And what VAR has taken away is that. But that's the only reason I think it is needed for these errors that can change games in such a way, and they will cost points. And we don't then want teams coming back to those big decisions and saying, well, that's the reason we've been relegated, or that's the reason we've missed out on a trophy.
Well, let's be honest. If things had continued to go against Newcastle United on Saturday night and they'd not been able... Listen, Marco Bizot has saved everyone, really, hasn't he, by being an absolute donut and coming out and karate kicking Jacob Murphy. I mean, if he hadn't have done that, Aston Villa probably go on and win the game because of the way that it was going and things were going their way and not Newcastle's. But if that happens and you end up with Newcastle going out of the Cup, that's their season pretty much over. I know they've got Champions League to play for, but they're not going to win the Champions League, and no one thinks they are. It's going to be very difficult for them to claw their way into the European places. They may well do it, but it's going to be difficult for them to do that. But the FA Cup is almost like it's something to keep their season alive, Crook, and that could be a massive turning point. So actually, maybe there'll be Newcastle fans that get up this morning, they go to the club shop and they get a Newcastle shirt with Marco Bizot and his number on the back. Maybe that's what happens. I don't know. F.A. Dean, thank you very much for your defence of VAR. And defensive official. F.A. Dean. Dean PGMO Ashton. You see, he was so desperate to get rid of the dashboard Dean moniker that he's now walking around clutching a rule book and sticking it up inside his t-shirt line.
You're just delighted I've deflected from you.
Yes, I am. You're absolutely right. Okay, shall we move on? Talk about deflecting attention away. Shall we talk to West Ham and Leeds victories over the weekend, because they just about got the job done? Well, let's start with West Ham United and Nuno Espirito Santo, because I wonder whether or not these victories that Leeds and West Ham both managed over the weekend actually sort of give them a little bit of extra fight going forward, and they're symptomatic of the way they're playing at the moment. But Crescencio Somerville coming up with yet another moment which stopped West Ham's FA Cup campaign, Crook, going for a Burton.
Yeah, I mean, he's in brilliant form, isn't he? Not just in the Premier League, but in the Cup as well. I did the third round game against QPR, and he made a massive difference there. Again, needing extra time to beat an EFL opponent. Confidence-wise, any victory West Ham can get is only going to help on the run-in. But can I make a point about extra time here? I think extra time is a nonsense now in the FA Cup. Those Birmingham and Leeds players were dead on their feet on Sunday. They didn't want extra time, should have gone straight to penalties. And if you're looking for upsets, this goes back to, I think, the game you did last season when Tamworth took Tottenham to extra time. Yeah. The superior fitness and the squad depth for the Premier League team is always going to come to the fore in extra time. So Burton Albion's best hope, and I think they deserved a shot at it, of causing a shock, would have been from penalty kicks. I think extra time should just be abolished now completely.
Yeah, extra time, I think, for finals, absolutely fair enough. I completely get that. But apart from that, I don't think you need extra time, Dean Ashton. I mean, obviously, if you hadn't have had extra time in the 2006 FA Cup final, then you could have, you might have won it on penalties.
We probably wouldn't have done, and I still wouldn't have took a pen because I'd already been dragged. I'd already been dragged at that point. Yeah, I mean, I've been very much quite vocal about my disgust of of extra time over the
Is that
years.
because you didn't want to do the extra running for another half an hour?
Yes, but we all don't. You just see it in the players as soon as the final whistle goes. No players don't want it. You're then really fearful. The longer it goes, the more tired people get, the more cautious they get. I can I can count on one hand, extra times that I've enjoyed watching. So many of them descend into chaos of calf stretching and time wasting. That's how it feels as a player. And also to caveat that, I love penalties. I think it's the greatest thing that football has ever invented because it's the ultimate test. It's the ultimate test for any professional. You versus the goalkeeper from 12 yards. I just think I find it glorious. I mean, it's horrible, of course, for anyone that misses, but I just think once you've been through that, if an hour and a half's football isn't enough for any team to beat, certainly a team like West Ham to beat Burton, then you're right. Burton should get that opportunity to go straight to penalties. And I think I sat there with my son and watched the West Ham game because he absolutely loves Adama Traore, who, like the T, got very much stuck in the Burton mud. And I thought Burton really did have their chances to cause the big upset, and it took Somerville's sort of electricity in the way that he comes on and just freestyles in taking people on, and you can just see how confident he is, and definitely saved their blushes.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? Now that you're on the FA board, it would be good for you to sort of change the rules of the FA Cup, because the Carabao Cup has been much better and a brilliant spectacle because of the fact that after 90 minutes it goes straight to penalty kicks. And look, when you make all the changes that they've made to the FA Cup, and for me, the fact that they've taken away replays is an absolute pain, because I used to love that, but I know that the fixture congestion meant that it was impossible to be able to keep that going. But I do think that you need to give something back to the lower league teams, and you're not giving them home ties like you do in the German Cup. What they do is they give the lower ranked team the opportunity to play at home. That's how it works. Instead, you've got to offer them something, and that lifeline of a penalty shootout actually could be, so in some cases for football clubs, absolute saviour. I mean, I was looking at Macclesfield, who did beat Crystal Palace, by the way, in the previous round. They made 100 grand out of that. Now, for Macclesfield, in the sixth tier of English football, to get 100 grand into their coffers, that's massive for them. That is absolutely huge for the way they run their football club going forward. And I think of other teams that have got financial issues, Macclesfield aren't one, but I'm just talking about the level of income. That would be great if they could get through one tie in the third or fourth round. All of a sudden, you've got a lifeline for a football club. So I do think that we need to really think about that from a moral point of view, actually, as well as a sporting one.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I just think I agree with Dean. We'd love to see penalties. And actually, I loved your enthusiasm, Dean, about the penalty shootout yesterday. You said exactly what you've just said now on air. You said it's the supreme test. And actually, when you get to extra time, I think unless you're a fan of one of the two teams, you want to see penalties, don't you?
Yeah.
You want to see penalties. You don't want it won in extra time. And what a test of West Ham's character it would have been away from home on a dodgy pitch against a team miles below them in the pyramid. So will it happen?
Tell me.
And also, what it did do though, Dino, yesterday, it did give me a half off. I didn't actually start my commentary until half time.
Which is more important than anything else, that you had another lazy day where you put your feet up and got paid for it, of course.
Lit the cigar for the first half.
Yeah, went into reporter mode, didn't you? But I just think, tell me if I'm wrong, but is there a worse feeling in football than sitting through another 30 minutes? And I'm talking about, like Crookie said, that you're just a neutral football fan and you're watching the game. You sit through 30 minutes of extra time, which is horrendous, and then they score in the last minute of extra time. That's probably the worst when you're all ready for pen. Everyone wants it. Everybody wants penalties, and they score in the last minute.
I don't know. I'll tell you you're wrong.
Is the pitch.
I'll tell you you're wrong. One, extra time in the World Cup final of 2022 was brilliant. Secondly, Manchester United beating Liverpool with the last kick of the game in the 121st minute, Amad Diallo to steer them into the semi-final at Old Trafford, was one of the most dramatic moments I've ever commentated on. And I can see it right now, that moment of him racing away and scoring that goal and being in that stadium when it completely erupts. Even Lee Dixon, who was co-commentating with me, threw his mic on the floor and ran down the length of the gantry. Couldn't believe it. It was just like unbelievable. And it was absolutely off the charts.
There's always an outlier, though, isn't there?
There's always moments that prove the rule or disprove the rule. But I think in general, we're over extra time, aren't we?
But I don't think you can give me too many examples of a team from a lower division getting a draw after 90 minutes and going into extra time and actually prevailing.
Coventry City in the semi-final of same FA Cup year should have had a goal right at the very end of extra time. Victor Torp, and if that had gone in, it would have been the greatest upset of all time ever.
But it didn't. And
but boy, did you have a panic up that day. Leeds penalty perfection, 120 minutes of deadlock. I have to say, I thought Luca Perry's save from Tommy Doyle was one of the best I've seen. In the way he sort of gave himself that extra propulsion to get to the right-hand side and tip it round the post. I thought that was excellent. Freddie Potts' red card. Have we got any complaints about that, Dino, have you?
Not really, no. I think it was take away the follow through. I think the way he really scissored into the knee of the player, I think was always going to be a red card. It was just interesting that the referee took a yellow card out as he walked across, obviously then put it back in his pocket, looked at the player, and then obviously produced a red card. But either way, I think he did get to the right decision.
And a quick word on Burnley, because if you look at Leeds and West Ham, I think they've shown a lot of fighting spirit. Leeds in particular over the course of 3 or 4 months now, or probably 2 or 3 months actually. And West Ham, ever since they decided to part company with Lucas Paquetá, it seems to have sort of united the group, and they're digging in for one another, and they've put some good results on the board, and they've got through a difficult situation at Burton at the weekend. But Burnley being beaten by Mansfield, I mean, it was a brilliant free kick that was scored right at the very end, and we should probably highlight that. But my God, I mean, if you're Scott Parker, this is not a great feeling, is it?
Particularly after what they did in midweek. You know, I was at Selhurst Park. They were 2-0 down, looked like another inevitable defeat in the Premier League. They've come back. They've scored 3 goals in 7 minutes. They've seen it out in the second half. I didn't come away thinking, well, there you go, they're going to go on a run to safety now. But you thought that could at least give them a little bit of a springboard for the rest of the season. But it's absolutely been swiped from under their feet, isn't it, by losing at home to Mansfield. There's a big disconnect looking at social media between the fans and the owner. I think Alan Pace has come out with some comments that haven't gone down particularly well with the supporters in recent weeks, and they're on Scott Parker's back. So as West Ham and Leeds take confidence from the fact that their cup run is continuing to the round of 16, this is another hammer blow psychologically for Burnley.
Do you remember when Alan Pace took over Burnley and he came up with that famous quote in which he said, we've got an ownership the like you've never seen before. Okay. How's that going, fella? Right, let's turn our attention to 2 new managers that are taking the dugout this week at Nottingham Forest and at Tottenham. Well, clearly, Evangelos Marinakis had already lined up Vitor Pereira before he'd sacked Sean Dyche, because literally hours after Dyche was given his marching orders, it looked pretty certain that Vitor Pereira was coming in. Just 114 days in charge for Sean Dyche, who has the best Premier League win percentage of any Nottingham Forest manager. It's a bit of an odd decision, this, Dino, isn't it?
I think it's very odd, because who's the type of man you would need in this situation? It is Sean Dyche. It's the most Sean Dyche thing ever that he's criticised so often for maybe his team's attacking flair, and his team go and record a record for the amount of shots this season, and then they can't score, and then he gets the sack because of it. But they'd actually been on a decent run. I think it's more the manner of the defeat against Leeds, the manner of the result against Wolves. I think that is it's as simple as that. And again, I think it's just really panic probably from the owner. But again, he has done a lot for that club. So I guess if you are a Forest supporter, I wonder how you really feel. Whether you just think, well, no, we'll continue to trust his decision making.
Well, Marinakis is very popular because he's driven the club from championship strugglers up into the Premier League and into Europe. So you can understand the loyalty that the supporters show. But I think we should turn our gaze, not necessarily even on Marinakis, but on Edu Gaspar and those making the decisions to bring the players in. Because, as you say, Sean Dyche may well not have formulated the best playing style. It might not be peak, Barcelona from 2008. However, it's actually 35 shots in one game and not scoring. He's not down to Sean Dyche and his game plan. His game plan is okay. If you are recording that number of shots, and as you've already mentioned, a record number of shots since he's been in charge in the Premier League, then clearly what he has devised is correct. The issue is the quality of player that has been brought in to service that game plan. No?
Definitely. And, Vitor Pereira, I think one of the attractions with bringing him in is what he did at Wolves when he first went in there last season and obviously steered them away from relegation. But he had Matheus Cunha amongst others. He had Jurgen Strand-Larsen, who was banging form. I'm not sure he's got that calibre of player of Forest. If you take Morgan Gibbs-White out of the equation, he's not had the best of seasons. But I've got Pereira's CV in front of me, and this looks like a marriage made in heaven in many ways, because since 2013, so 13 years, he's had 11 clubs, Vitor Pereira. He never stays anywhere more than about a year at best. And obviously Marinakis is a manager who has this sort of revolving door, not just at Forest, but Olympiacos as well. Even if he keeps them up, if Marco Silva becomes available in the summer when his Fulham contract expires, we're going to be talking about another managerial change. We're going to be talking about a fifth Forest manager since the start of this season.
And talking of that revolving door at Olympiacos and the City ground, of course, that revolving door includes Vitor Pereira, who was at Olympiacos under Marinakis. So he's worked with him before. So has Marco Silva. And look, the odds are he'll be the next Nottingham Forest manager at the end of the season. Do you think he can keep them up, Dean Ashton?
Yes, I do. I think there is a very good squad of players there, and he did show at Wolves that he could get results very, very quickly. I think he will change the system. It wouldn't surprise me if they did go to a back three. And I think he will keep them up. I do. I just think when you're looking at the teams and the quality that I think they have, I do fancy Nottingham Forest to stay up.
Okay, so if Nottingham Forest stay up, who goes down, Dean?
West Ham or Tottenham, I would say.
Okay. Well, West Ham would hurt you to your core.
Of course. I've just got this almost horrible feeling that it's going to be between those two sides. I think you just look at Tottenham's run; they are going to be right in it come within 2 or 3 games. I do. I think they're going to be right in the mix. Don't quite understand the appointment. Also, the injuries that they've got, and West Ham, even though they've shown a lot of courage and much better performances, there's still just something about conceding that goal in the dying minutes against Manchester United when there's 3 points on offer, and they've still got to do things that they haven't really done all season, which is put multiple wins on the board. And Leeds at home, I think they're going to pull themselves away. I could see West Ham and Tottenham fighting out, which I think could be incredible.
Well, I sat with Stuart Pearce the other week and I said to him, look, I think I don't think they'll go down, Tottenham, but I think they're going to be right in the mix to the very end because one, their fixtures, and two, because there's no fight in them, which is a real problem. It is a proper issue. Now, Igor Tudor, who has bought his apples and decided to take up the reins at Tottenham Hotspur, may well be the answer. I mean, looking at his CV, he hasn't exactly got a sort of stellar CV. I mean, he took over Lazio from Maurizio Sarri at the end of the season in March 2024, a sort of similar sort of rescue job. He resigned at the end of that campaign. He took over this time last year, maybe a little bit later, from Thiago Motta as the head coach of Juventus, and he sort of got them into Champions League qualification. That didn't really continue after that. Maybe he is just a short impact manager that can come in and do a job until the end of the season and save them. Look, he's known for a forward thinking philosophy. So I wonder whether or not that's the reason that he's been brought in, because he's going to get Tottenham, all guns blazing, a bit of a return to dare is to do attitude. Crook?
Maybe, but I just think it's a massive gamble to bring in someone not tested in the Premier League when you are on the verge of being dragged into relegation danger. And you mentioned their fixtures already. I'm looking at them here. I think there's only one game up until the end of April, which is Wolves away, that you can say with any certainty that Tottenham should win. They've got to go to Sunderland, they've got Brighton at home, they've got to go to Fulham in a London derby, they've got Palace, who are more than capable on their day at home, they've got to go to Anfield, where they're going to get beat. Forest at home at the end of March looks a massive game, and of course they've got the North London derby this weekend. So what happens? What happens if he gets to the middle of April and he's not won a game, Igor Tudor? Do they look at making another change and bring in that Premier League firefighter, that Harry Redknapp type character?
Sean Dyche?
I don't understand the appointment. I really don't. And
do you know what?
I think it sums up the attitude and the ego at Tottenham. I'm not sure that they believe that they're in relegation danger.
They are.
They're too good.
They are. Trust me, they are. And I've done lots of their games recently. I was at their Manchester United game. I was at their Manchester City game. I was at their Newcastle game last week. They are. They are.
We know they are.
No doubt about it.
But do the owners know they are? And do the players who've got massive opinions of their own worth, do they know they're in a relegation fight?
I tell you why I think they do, because they made the change. Because I walked out of that stadium with Glenn Hoddle, and Glenn was looking at me and I was looking at him, and I said, Glenn, I like Thomas Frank, but they've got to change it. They have to change it now, because the players are not responding. And if you don't do something right now, it's going to be massive. There's going to be a massive problem. And he was like, yeah, but he didn't want to do it. He understands that Thomas Frank is a good manager and a good coach, but he, like everybody else, thinks the recruitment hasn't been good enough. But there is a moment in a season where you have to realise this is a big problem. And they've realised that, and they have made the change. Whether they've got the appointment right is completely up in the air. We don't know, because we don't know enough about Igor Tudor and his ability to be able to work in the Premier League. He's never done it before. It could be, of course, hilarious if they do sack him after 5 games like they did with Stellini and bring in Sean Dyche, for example. And Sean Dyche and Nuno Espirito Santo keep up West Ham and Tottenham, and Nottingham Forest go down. I want Nottingham Forest to stay up, but that would be hilarious, Dino.
And it's not out of the realms of possibility. That's the thing. But Crookie's right. Do they understand? Because that is what a relegation battle is. It's understanding where you are. It's understanding the urgency in which you have to maybe change the way you're playing. And that's what I'm going to wait to see, really, is what is Tudor going to do with this Tottenham side that seem to get a new injury, a big injury every single week.
Yeah.
And ill-disciplined. And, right now they've probably got 11 players. So 11 first-team players to go with, and no one's particularly coming back anytime soon. So
and it's not their best 11 players. Let's be completely clear. They've got a very makeshift back line.
Absolutely, and you're going to hope that Dom Solanke stays completely fit and can't rest. Honestly, they are right in it with the fixtures that they have. They're going to be right in it. Even maybe after the North London derby, they could be right there.
Well, look, the key thing is that they play the North London derby on Sunday. Crook and I are going to this. Crook says he's going to wear a baseball cap because he's scared of the Tottenham fans. But by the time we get there, West Ham would have played their game against Bournemouth at home. Now, if they were to win that game, they'd be on 27 points, 2 points behind Tottenham Hotspur. Nottingham Forest also play at the weekend before the North London derby. Their game is away at Liverpool. It's only a couple of hours beforehand. At home to Liverpool. Now, they're unlikely to get any points in that game, obviously, because it's Liverpool and it's going to be incredibly difficult. They've been to Fenerbahce midweek as well. But if they were to get a new manager bounce and to get something from that game, and Tottenham was that wafer-thin margin away from the relegation zone by the start of the North London derby, that is going to be some story on Sunday afternoon, isn't it, Crook?
Yeah, and you just wonder what the atmosphere will be like, because that's been a big problem at the stadium, toxic feeling around, obviously lots of empty seats in the game that you did against Newcastle. I'd imagine because they've got rid of Thomas Frank, who the fans turned on very quickly, and actually I was speaking to an ex-Tottenham player of the weekend, and he was angry how quickly the fans turned. He went back to a game against Bournemouth. I think their second home league game of the season. They lost 1-0. Bournemouth are a good team, and he thinks Thomas Frank lost the fans that day and never really recovered. So Igor Tudor's got to get off to a good start, or he might be subject to the same treatment. And with the greatest will in the world, we were at the reverse meeting, weren't we, at Arsenal?
Oh.
Terrible Tottenham that day. And if they play like
Worst
that again,
performance I've seen.
There's only one winner. And you're right, the scoreboard pressure, particularly from that West Ham game at home to Bournemouth, could be absolutely immense by the time we kick off on Sunday afternoon.
If the Tottenham fans didn't take to Thomas Frank, who they would have known from Brentford, how are they going to take to Igor Tudor, who they haven't ever heard of? I mean, obviously, some of us had heard of him. Some of us had to ask other people who he was, Crook.
You hipsters, you're ahead of me, you hipsters.
He was a brilliant central defender, by the way. But he, you can imagine that it goes wrong against Arsenal, right? Let's just say they go front-footed and get picked apart by Arsenal on Sunday afternoon, like properly done. What's the reaction going to be like then? It's going to be an absolute nightmare.
Well, I mean, that's the pressure, I think, that, again, you maybe don't understand, and those players will not have been in those situations, I wouldn't have thought, very often, where that a relegation battle brings. Your home supporters are incredibly anxious and need something to get behind the team. So I'm almost envious of you two, the fact you're going to be there and really feel what that's going to be like for the new manager and the players.
You can be envious of me because I'll be sitting comfortably. Don't be envious of him because he's worried for his safety.
Listen, all I've said for several months now, going back to that final in Bilbao, is exactly what Ange Postecoglou came out and said on the overlap. I just didn't do it with an Australian accent while holding up the Europa League trophy.
And you hadn't been the manager of the football club. Although you did put yourself forward, didn't you? In fact, at least if you had been given the caretaker job till the end of the season, as you proposed, by the way, the Tottenham fans would have known who you were, and you would have known who you were.
And I've got more Premier League experience than Igor Tudor.
But also, I think people are very, very mouthy until they walk up to Hagrid and realise just how big he is.
Yeah, I've noticed that. He hasn't got any, just to let you know, he hasn't got any upper body strength. You're okay. It's fine. It took him about 5 years to try and work up the amount of strength to push me into a swimming pool once. I used to stand on the edge of the swimming pool when we used to go on holiday and get him to try and push me in, and he didn't have the body strength. So I had the sort of core strength to be able to hold him off, and he kept coming up and trying to push me, and he couldn't do it, and I'd stand on the edge. And then one night when I was absolutely bladdered, he managed to do it, and he slipped a disc in the back of my neck.
If at first you don't succeed, try and try again, which should be the Tottenham motto for this season, shouldn't it?
Right, that's it from us. Thank you very much for joining us on Premier League All Access. We'll be back on Thursday to look back on the big European action. Newcastle against Qarabag is live on talkSPORT on Wednesday. And we've got Crystal Palace and Nottingham Forest in action on Thursday as well. I'll be in Bosnia on Thursday. when we do the Premier League All Access podcast, because I'm going to watch Crystal Palace's trip to Mostar, where they do, the red ball thing where they throw you off the bridge and do the skydiving thing. That's where they do it. So I'm going to go and have a look at the bridge.
They used to do that in Bogna. I'm sure Red Bull sponsored the Bogna Birdman. So, but Bosnia may be a little bit more glamorous.
I'm sure as well. I'm sure Crook would be able to push you off that if he needed to.
He'd definitely have a go. Right, thank you very much. We'll see you on Thursday. Make sure you keep listening to Premier League All Access from talkSPORT. And, of course, talkSPORT is the place to be for all the midweek European football.